once this tank runs dry and interest rates they don't even have to go up from here. They could just stay where they are. There's going to be a scramble for dollars, and then instead of being able to withdraw cash from the reserve repo facility, they'll have to sell assets to raise the dollars that they need to pay off their debt. And from there, you'll see a spiral of asset prices, and from there, everything should go. And then the Fed's going to have to print and reverse everything, and from there, I think the dollar explodes.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for October 2nd through October 9th, 2023, while supplies last. This week we feature two different specials, Silver Kangaroos and Fractional Gold Eagles. We have 2023 Australian Silver Kangaroos at just $3.15 over spot. We also have 1/10 ounce Gold Eagles at $32 over melt and 1/4 ounce Gold Eagles at $60 over melt. The 2023 Silver Kangaroo from Australia are renowned for their 4/9 fine purity, as well as their recognizability and design. Like many other coins, they come 25 to a tube. However, unlike others, the Australian Monster Box is just 250 coins, making it the most affordable Monster Box available, especially with a premium of just $3.15 over spot per ounce. And finally, Silver Kangaroos are IRA eligible. The Gold Eagle was first released in 1986 and has been one of the most popular gold bullion coins in the world, providing instant recognizability and investor trust. The 1/10 and 1/4 ounce Eagles are additionally sought after for their high degree of flexibility and liquidity. Like the 1 ounce Eagle, the 1/10 and 1/4 ounce Eagles are 22 karat gold strengthened with copper. They're 1/10 and 1/4 of a troy ounce respectively and come in tubes and boxes at quantity. The 1/10 ounce Gold Eagle is just $32 over melt, and the 1/4 ounce Eagle is just $60 over melt while supplies last. They're also IRA eligible. And if you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, an IRA holding assets in a private depository rather than a bank or brokerage, call us, and we'll be happy to help you in that process. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We are always delighted to have this returning guest. Rafi Farber is the founder of the Endgame Investor. He joins us this Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023. Rafi, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks for having me, Dunnigan. I always enjoy talking with you.
And our viewers and subscribers always enjoy your visits here because I look at the quality and the tone of the comments that are entered under your visits, and they are uniformly appreciative and respectful of your insights and your thoughtfulness and the depth of reflection that you bring to all that you comment on, as well as the anchor in historical and spiritual roots that you also bring as your perspective, the lens through which you see the world in general, all things important, not the least of which our financial lives that are going to affect all of our families and cultures and communities and nations going forward. You and I were just speaking about some fragility, or shall we say, Japan painting itself into a corner in relating to the bonds and their currency. We've been warned by Gregor Mannarino for years that he says, keep your eye on the bond market, that the debt market is by many times larger than the stock or equities markets around the world, and that is where it's very likely that a lot of the stone that would be pulled from the dam that would cause the whole thing to come tumbling down may be starting. If you could talk to us about what you're watching in Japan and why it seems that they've painted themselves into a corner, and no matter what they do, it could be very destructive for their currency at least, and perhaps for the bond market and derivatives based on that.
Okay. So before I get into any specifics of what's happening, as if it's in a vacuum, I'll say that I'd say the fulcrum of the Keynesian system, the Keynesians, the money printers who believed that monetary policy could massage an economy and make everybody rich or at least prosperous in some way, that inflation creates wealth. Basically, that's what it comes down to. That really relies on the poster child of Japan. And Japan, after World War II, after they were nuked twice, the horrible thing that happened to them, they became the poster child of Keynesian economics, and we see that now in their debt to GDP ratio, which is itself is a Keynesian measure. It's like 260%, 270%, some ridiculous number. If money printing works, then Japan proves it. If money printing doesn't work, Japan's going to prove it hard. And it looks like they're on the verge of cracking. So this entire alliance between the United States and Japan has been going on since their defeat in World War II, and now I think they're going to be a big player in the unraveling of the entire Keynesian system, which relies both spiritually on their example and practically on their not imploding, which eventually is going to happen pretty soon, I think. And the mechanics of that are basically that Japan right now owns, I think it's 46 or 47%. The Bank of Japan, meaning the printer of the yen, of which the yen is the liability of that bank, owns 47% of all outstanding Japanese government bonds. So when you have a central bank that prints your currency, 47% of their assets are the bonds themselves. When those bonds go down, that central bank goes into massive losses, which even the Fed is experiencing, just not to the degree that the Bank of Japan is, because the Fed doesn't own 47%. I think they own like 20 or 30% or something like that. It's still, an atrocious number, but it's less. So when Japanese government bonds go down, meaning when yields go up, the unit of liability of that central bank also goes down in purchasing power, because what the definition of the yen is now everything that's on the other side of the balance sheet. So if rates go up, the yen goes down. And we can see this. I don't know if you want to show the viewers or just take my word for it, that if you look at a chart of the yen versus the dollar and then the 10-year Japanese government bond yield, as the yield goes up, the yen goes down in purchasing power relative to the dollar. So it's a pretty tight chart. The correlation is there. So what can they do to strengthen the yen? Well, they can sell treasuries, because Japan, again being the Keynesian poster child for the whole world, owns, I think, $1.1 trillion worth of treasuries, of long-term treasuries. So they are the biggest foreign holder of treasury debt. They could theoretically sell that debt, and then they would get dollars for that sale, and then they would sell the dollars versus the yen and very temporarily, even ephemerally, strengthen the yen. I think we're even seeing that today. The yen was at 150 per dollar, and then something happened. We don't know exactly what yet, and then it went like this, and then it went down to 148, which means the yen strengthened a little bit. It could be the Bank of Japan is doing something. But then again, like it shows that Japan and the U.S. are tied at the hip. If they sell treasuries, then they raise the yield of of U.S. treasuries, right? Because if you're selling, it goes down in value and the yield goes up, and then that increases the differential between the rate you get with holding dollars and the rate you get holding yen, and that weakens the yen itself after a very short-term strengthening. So no matter what the Bank of Japan does, it's going to weaken the yen. There's no direction it can go. Yeah, there will be like short spikes up in the yen, but they'll very quickly be followed by plunges down, along with U.S. interest rates, which I see the spiral already starting. Maybe it's not, but it looks like it by what I'm seeing in the TLT ETF, which is the main long-term Treasury ETF. What we saw last week actually was the biggest volume trading in that long-term bond ETF ever in its existence, and I think it goes back to 2000 or 2001. And the yield went down a little bit at the end of the week. The TLT ETF strengthened a little bit. And usually when you have this massive volume on a jerk up, that usually signals an intermediate bottom, and there's a trend going up. But that didn't happen. Like on Monday, the markets opened, and then TLT went down, meaning long-term yields went way up again. And we're seeing that again today at the same time that the yen jerks up a little bit. So I see the two central banks are tied at the hip, and they're starting to spiral down the drain. That's what I'm seeing.
Even over the past couple of decades, we've seen numerous instances where the U.S. bond auction was in question, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, some foreign buyer stepped up and sopped up all the bonds that were being offered, and it was a successful auction. More than a few times that has been Japan. There were some predictions by analysts that, this one looks like it's going to be a really tough bond auction, and then nope, Japan stepped up and bought the bonds again. So there are multiple ways that Japan has been seen as a key contributor to the stability of the international markets over the past couple of decades, and particularly the U.S. So the fact that people may be thinking, why do we care? Japan's got their own problems. We've got our own problems. Let them solve theirs. But it's not that simple. And thank you for showing that there are many ways in which the demise of one can lead to the demise of the other. And we need to be watchful about that, because that could be a signal that things are about to go off the table as far as the U.S. is concerned. Any more thoughts on that particular topic before we move on?
Yeah, what you're saying about the auctions, it could be Japan many times. It's some other central bank. But what it really shows is that the central banks are all really on the same team. And that is both very daunting and scary, but it's also liberating. I mean, there's two sides to every coin. So on the one hand, yeah, it's daunting because the average guy in the street, even the ones that understand finance, God, all the central banks are against me and they're working against me. And how will I ever conquer all these money printers? It seems impossible. Yeah, I understand that thought. But at the same time, they're all on the same team, yes, and they all have the same interest. They're all trying to keep their it's all one Keynesian system, right? And there's different players, and we're all the pawns. That's what it is. We're already under a one government machine here. That's what it is. There's different flavors of it. Like I'm in Israel, you're in the U.S. We have different flavors of government. I have Bibi, you have Biden. What's the difference, really? It's all central banks. I have the Bank of Israel, you have the Fed. The point is they're all on the same team, and because they're all on the same team, that means they're all going to go down together. Like very quickly, they're all going to go down together, because once somebody breaks the cartel, like there have been attempts at cartels and they can succeed for a while, but once somebody breaks from the cartel quickly disintegrates. So once this cartel breaks, once there's one break in it, and that break could even be Argentina with Javier Milei going on there, the Rothbardian libertarian economist that's winning in the Argentinian polls, that's a hyperinflating country right now. It could be anything. But once there's one break in that, the whole thing, comes unraveling. Evil that unites is very powerful, but the more powerful it is, the more brittle it is. And that's the case with all forms of evil.
You're really keying in on something I think that we need to focus on there. There was an article that came out on Zero Hedge about 6 months ago called "The Importance of Zero," and that caught my eye. And I looked at it. What was that about? And they were talking about in a regime of deception and betrayal, where any group, you call it a cartel, that's fine. You could look at all the governments of the world, how they acted in lockstep over the past 3 years to force people to participate in an experiment and that sort of thing, and restrict their movement and ruin many people's businesses, etc. They were saying in an environment like that, it's important that there be zero truth tellers because it cannot be tolerated. In other words, rather than, we're tolerant, equity and diversity and all that sort of thing, let's just let all the viewpoints be out there and have this open public forum on the internet and all that. No, there was a very concerted and largely successful effort to stifle and to eliminate dissenting voices, independent voices. And the importance of that, they were pointing out, is not just, as you were just saying, if someone steps away from a cartel, it can make the whole thing come tumbling down. We've interviewed Steve St. Angelo from the SRS Rocco report. He talks about the brittleness or the fragility of overly complex empires, long supply chains, very vertically integrated, high complexity. The taller you build the Tower of Babel, the more likely to come tumbling down it is. And but that point that these repressive monopolies cannot tolerate the fact of freedom of choice. They cannot tolerate the freedom of thought. They cannot tolerate the freedom of expression. And that's why we all need to be very aware of that. Our channel, Liberty and Finance, trying to connect those two, that freedom and financial survival and thriving are in very real sense connected, because it's so important for the powers that be to keep us not thinking truthful thoughts and not communicating in truthful words to each other. Could you expand on that before we move on?
Yes, definitely. We feel a lot of dread when it comes to platforms. For example, this platform that we're speaking on right now, as soon as this is going up on YouTube, and there's a lot of problems with YouTube, and I don't deny it. I know exactly what's going on. I know very intimately what's going on. I'm on YouTube myself. If we were to compare the totalitarianism that is going on now with the totalitarianism of the past, even with the Soviet Union or centuries before, it always comes up. But now it's like as bad as YouTube is, we're still talking about this right now, and it will probably be fine. There are problems, and there are things that you can't get away with. But one of the things that you can get away with is talking about the base of all of the problems, which is itself the money, because they don't even understand that that is the source of all of the evil. They don't get it. So we can talk about this pretty freely as long as we don't use certain keywords, and fine, okay. But then you have, Elon Musk, who is not perfect, and Twitter is not perfect, and there are serious problems with it, and it's not completely free speech. However, every time that they kick somebody off a platform for saying the wrong thing, they strengthen the opposition, and Rumble becomes more popular, or whatever the alternative might be. It doesn't have to specifically be them; it could be anybody. But really, the cat and mouse game that we're playing now it's much more efficiently and easily in our hands, even though it feels like we're losing, because we can raise up a platform of truth speaking much quicker now, and there's still a little bit of Western values left that we can hang on with our fingernails and continue the free speech that unravels this entire evil. So no, it's not perfect, but it's not like they can stomp on everything at one fell swoop and silence all of us. They tried in 2020, 2021. They did it for a while, but now we're back. So we really are winning this battle, even though they win from now, from time to time. But we're doing much better than we were centuries ago, or even the dissidents were in the Soviet Union. We're doing much better, and we're having a much easier time. And I think we're definitely going to win this. But the battle is going to be a lot easier to win than most people think. I think the tough thing will be after we win. How do we rebuild without a substantial amount of chaos? And that's going to take our talents, and that's going to be the hard part, I think.
And doing something constructive, as you're implying there, about rebuilding a more free and fair system, that sort of thing, takes people functioning at a higher level than just sort of our reflexive, defensive, animalistic fight or flight type response, which is distressingly easy for people to fall into. We saw a lot of that over the past 3 years, where being barraged by messages of fear from the mainstream channels of all kinds and governments were pretty effective at keeping a large majority of the population kind of in that fight or flight mode, and that groups of people can be easily swayed when in that state of mind. You've tried to be a voice for people thinking on a higher plane, and thinking forward, and thinking about what should be and what needs to be and how we can bring that to be. I'd like to get back to that in a moment, but first, as you're looking forward, you're often looking for leading indicators, as you mentioned, in the Japanese bond market, etc. We also discussed before we got started about some unusual behavior in the repo market, the reverse repo market, in the U.S. These facilities that have been set up by the Fed to try to help basically be a lifeline for financial institutions that are getting themselves in trouble or have gotten themselves in trouble, and keep them from going belly up. Can you talk to us about some forward-looking signs that are bringing you concern that we may be seeing be closer to the end than we think of the effectiveness of that tool? Yeah,
well, the basic story is that in 2020 and 2021, the Fed printed so much money that banks couldn't handle it all. So there was backup, and they needed a place to put all this cash so that they didn't just dump it into anything that they could dump it into, and then have the money supply really just go crazy vertical in a very short period of time, which might have triggered hyperinflation at that point. So they needed a facility to put it into that would earn the bank's interest. They'd be incentivized to put it there outside of the banking system. And that's all the extra money. I think it topped out at 2.3 or 2.2 trillion in 2022, mid 2022, something like that. And now it is at 1.36 trillion, if I remember correctly. So basically about $900 billion have come out in about 15 months or so. Now, there's been a question, if you look at the money supply, and I look at this, now it's published every month on a weekly basis. It publishes the four weekly data points every month. It's now released. And we've been in absolute deflation since June 2022. Now, the question is, if we've been in absolute deflation for that long, how has there not been a serious crisis? And there's been a regional banking crisis, but they kind of got control of that for now. there hasn't been like a crazy 2008 crisis where everybody thinks the entire financial world is going to end, in a matter of days or hours. That we haven't seen that yet. And the question is, why not? Well, I believe it's because of the reverse repos. We're seeing that all this money that was printed in 2020 and 2021 is now entering the bank system just now. So we have this like sort of delayed QE that couldn't get into the system back then and now is getting into the system. And my thinking is that once this facility runs dry, and it runs dry basically by the government raising the Feds raising debt, the Treasury issuing more debt in exchange for that reverse repo cash, which is then put into the banking system. So once that reserve tank of dollars runs dry, then you have all of these companies and banks paying these high interest rates on their debt service costs, and they have no reserve tank to draw from. So look, the financial crisis could happen anytime. It could happen tomorrow. But I think it is almost certain, and nothing is certain. And I could be missing something. I've been wrong before. But I think it is almost certain from my monetary Austrian school perspective that once this tank runs dry and interest rates they don't even have to go up from here. They could just stay where they are. There's going to be a scramble for dollars. And then instead of being able to withdraw cash from the reserve repo facility, they'll have to sell assets to raise the dollars that they need to pay off their debt. And from there, you'll see a spiral of asset prices. And from there, everything should go. And then the Fed's going to have to print and reverse everything. And from there, I think the dollar explodes.
Well, so I was going to ask you, based on the scenario you just painted, isn't there, what would prevent the Fed from, which had created that facility in the first place, from just running that playbook again?
You mean printing more money when they need to?
Sure.
Nothing will prevent them from that. Look, in the end, the Fed's going to have to decide: do they want to save the bond market, save the Treasury market, and allow the dollar to fail, or do they want to allow the Treasury market to fail and the federal government to go bankrupt and everyone who's invested in Treasuries to lose 100 cents on the dollar? But then the dollar would still exist, at a much lower nominally gold exchange ratio, could even go back to 35. But even if it does, if you have a stock portfolio, it's going to go almost everything's going to go bankrupt in it, except for maybe the gold miners. And even though in that scenario, gold would go back to $35 an ounce, the purchasing power of it would go way up, relative to that. So the number doesn't even matter. So they're going to have to choose. They're going to choose the dollar or the Treasury market. It's one and not the other. You can't save both. So they will save the Treasury market because in the end they're a bank and their friends are banks and the banks own the Treasuries, and they'll sacrifice the dollar. There's nothing else they can do.
If ordinary people living their lives, earning their paycheck, paying their bills, trying to save, are watching for kind of like a first stone to go from the dam, or kind of like a time to activate their end game strategy that they've been developing, is there any one place that you would have people focus primarily, or do you see so many potential areas of fragility in this house of cards that you say it isn't that straightforward to keep your eyes on one particular sign or signal?
No, I would say don't look at any particular thing. That's what I have to do. I have to look. I'm watching the animals or the bunnies come out of their holes, and always this one is that. I'm playing whack-a-mole. I'm trying to look and I'm trying to see, and I'm trying to predict, because that's what I do. That's the kind of information that I produce. And one of these days I'll be right, but I've definitely been wrong, and I've seen certain things that haven't panned out. But I still know that in the end, I know it's going to happen. So don't drive yourself crazy looking for the one signal that will show you that it's imminent, because first of all, you might be wrong, and second of all, the more you watch, the less time you're spent preparing for what you actually need to do. So the first thing you have to do is really you've got to make local connections. And and me talking to you, it doesn't seem like a local connection, but people in Israel watch these things, and I get calls all the time now from people who are saying, okay, Rafi, what do I do? I have this and that, and then I put their numbers in a little book, and I write down their addresses, and I know these people now, And I put their skills down in a list. I know what they can provide. So us reaching across international borders does help create local communities. So that's what you really need to do. Call up the people near you, find out who you can rely on, find out who has skills, and be ready to activate your local network. That's the most important thing you can do. Don't worry about the other signals. It's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. That's all you need to know.
One more topic I wanted to just brush on with you. We've talked about central banks, we've talked about currencies and the interconnectedness of those, that sort of thing. Something that I just became aware of about a week ago was a organization called the C40, which is a group of nearly 100 mayors around the world who are trying to figure out what they need to do in their cities and in those that they influence to meet World Health Organization's air quality guidelines going forward. And they have these very ambitious targets for 2030, they call it, such as limiting people to one flight every 3 years, or being able to purchase just a few garments per year, limiting the distance that people can travel, etc. And this is not just some crackpot group. Well, they may be crackpots, but they're not. These are mayors of 100 of the largest cities in the world that are trying to set these international goals. Since we just talked about the connectedness that we at the individual level share globally, what are you aware of or concerned about that the I guess you call them leaders of 100 of the major cities of the world are setting out these goals that basically are all structured around restricting people's freedoms and options and ability to move about, etc. Looking forward to, this is something that they see as necessary, but I think many people feel that this is an unjustified and immoral intrusion on the freedom of mankind.
Look, it's getting ridiculous. People are not going to stand for this. How do I say it? Like, when Hitler was at the height of his power, he was saying the Reich would last for 1,000 years. When the Soviet Union was at a height of its power, I thought it was all that and a bag of chips, or any superlative. That was a bad one, but the evil tends to get more ridiculous as it becomes more egocentric or self-centered or totally out of touch with the reality around it. So I don't fear these ridiculous statements, one flight every 3 years or a certain amount of clothing that you can buy. This is all crazy. So I see it as an encouraging sign that the more ridiculous they sound, the closer this is to ending, because they don't have that amount of control. They don't have this amount of power that they're portraying. It's all an illusion. So let them say what they want to say. Don't worry too much about it, because when the monetary system goes, it's all going to be irrelevant. Because the base of their power, once again, is the monetary system itself. That's what gives them all their power. That's how all these organizations were set up, through the U.S. funding the WHO through its own inflationary system, and all these countries that are donating to the WHO through their own inflationary systems and are all combining into it. But once their inflationary systems are nothing, the WHO has no funding, and they become who cares? Don't spend too much time worrying about these overreaching statements of maniacal control. It's not going to amount to anything. It's not going to lead to anything. They'll try. I know they're trying. I know they're evil. But again, the best you can do is build up your local community, and that's how you protect yourself. They want you to not buy as many clothes, then go to a guy who knows how to make clothing and pay him gold or silver under the table or something. That's what it's going to have to be in the end game anyway, at least in the initial stages of it.
For people who want to follow your work on the End Game Investor, how should they get connected, and what's available for them?
You can check out my YouTube channel, Rafi Farber. Type in the End Game Investor to any search engine. You'll find that it's a service through Seeking Alpha, and I put out a letter 3 or 4 times a week with a weekend report, focusing on the monetary developments in the banks from an Austrian school libertarian economics perspective. And you can also check out my Patreon at Endgame Investor, patreon.com/endgameinvestor, where I give a more biblical angle to these things. And the idea there is to reassure people that this is not the first time this has happened. This has happened before. The only difference now is that we're on a global scale, which, to me is encouraging. So maybe humanity, after experiencing this all at once, can actually reach the next step of whatever it has to evolve into. There is a plan for the world. Everything is going to be fine. That's not to say there isn't going to be pain and people aren't going to die. People are going to die, unfortunately. But if you can keep your emotions under control and realize that you're not in control, they are not in control, none of us are in control, and God is in control, you'll be okay. And keep making friends in your local circle.
We've been speaking with Rafi Farber, the founder of Endgame Investor. And Rafi, as always, thanks for joining us on Liberty and Finance. Thanks,
Danica. I'm looking forward to be back again.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.